Today happens to be week number 110 of these series of exploring the suttas, the Pali suttas, where we find whatever is left from the original teachings of Lord Buddha, still uncorrupted. Much is corrupted of the Dhamma today, but there's also wonderful resources in the form of the suttas that we still get. Yes, they are not 100% completely pure, because over the centuries much has been infiltrated. People have put so much of themselves into the suttas, their ideas. That's how you promulgate, that's how you can come up with your own theories, when you squeeze it into the volumes of suttas, and you make Lord Buddha or the Arya Savakas speak out your own thoughts, your own ideas. So as has been the case with other traditions or religions, philosophy throughout human history, the Dhamma proper has also undergone same or similar manipulations over the course of time. 2,600 years is a very long time. But it's quite amazing that a big chunk of the Dhamma still is there available, and that is what our endeavor here has been, to have us go through the suttas and really reacquaint ourselves with what the teachings of Lord Buddha are all about. How relevant are they to us now, 26 centuries later? How relevant is my practice in discovering the Dhamma? Is it even possible for me to attain any of those things that I keep reading about, hearing about? This is crucial. This is a very important question to ask, because the work that we do needs to be intelligent work. You know, sometimes people say, well, I worked very hard and I have nothing left, or I have nothing to show for it. Well, yes, the question then is not about whether you did work or not, whether you did toil and really struggle and put a lot of energy into it. Where did that energy go, though? How smart were you working? How well did you, the trajectory of the planning, the efforting. You could go in a circle, spiraling away and never get anywhere, actually just in a circle, because a spiral can take you either up or down. But what is the work that we're doing really doing for me? Is it benefiting me? Is the quality of my life getting better? That's a good way to start. And then you look back to the suttas and try to see relevance, if there's any, because every aspect of our human existence can be seen in examples through the dynamic interactions that we come across in the suttas. Now, especially in the case of these two suttas that I've selected for today, because oftentimes we can be stuck in our own ways of understanding the Dhamma, and because the mind is unlike, well, is not unlike, shall I say, not unlike the body, which is lazy. The body is lazy, and so is the mind that is deluded. That's how it has kept us in delusion. So there is this inertial stage that we have to overcome every so often. Because even if we get to a a certain station of development. Because of the familiarity to it, we become immune to it. So you have to push yourself. It's the same thing when you're working out at the gym, let's say, or on your own. You do 10 push-ups. Okay, you've developed the muscles when you couldn't do even one. Now you can do 10. But if you keep on just doing those 10 push-ups, the muscles, the body has now become immune to it. So there's not enough resistance for it because you're just matching the forces. There's no work being done as such. The only way that you can progress is if you introduce a new resistance. And that's how we grow. That's how we climb up a ladder. So when you come across the hindrances, it's actually a wonderful thing, because when there is this pushback from your resisting hindrances, such as drowsiness, sleepiness, anger, restlessness, or worry, when it didn't occur for the last 2-3 weeks and now it shows up, that is not time for you to panic or say that you're doing something wrong necessarily, but that's just part of the Dhamma, where you need to now create or develop newer, quote unquote, muscles, practice muscles. And the same goes with you understanding yourself. So we must challenge ourselves. And here in the suttas, we see that all the time. So these are not things like pillows for us to put our heads on and just say, okay, so I know this sutta, and yes, it's a cozy, lovely interaction, a story type of a thing. So yeah, no, there's more to it, because you have not infused your life into the sutta. We have to look for our lives within the suttas, our own practice within the suttas. In essence, they're about you and I, all of us. So if you can approach it as such, the suttas will give you so much, because the Dhamma, despite all that I've said in the beginning, that it has become corrupted, the Dhamma itself cannot be corrupted, however. The teachings can, and they do, and they are. But the Dhamma can never be. It can be just covered up. And we do an amazing job at covering up the Dhamma from our hearts all the time with the lies we tell ourselves about our progress, whether we're not doing good when we are, in fact. Or when we are doing good, we tell ourselves when we're not. And that's why it's important for us to develop honesty with ourselves, humility, but going back to the suttas and gauging my personal approach to the Dhamma and seeing if there is some resonance there within the suttas. Otherwise, maybe I'm just stuck. So stop telling ourselves the lies that we do tell ourselves. You're not going to get something for nothing. And the Dhamma requires everything, because we're just a bundle of delusion until we come to the Dhamma. We practice and we see the Dhamma. And that is the hope that Lord Buddha had for us. And that is why you see that vibrating through every single sutta. So for today, I chose, as I was mentioning briefly earlier, these two suttas today. One is from the numerical discourses, the Anguttara Nikaya, and the other one is from the Sangyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses. They're lovely suttas. They do have these two protagonists in both cases. One is Venerable Sariputta addressing Lord Buddha to encourage him to speak, to teach. And then the other one, again, we see the presence of Venerable Sariputta as one of the other protagonists in the other sutta, the Sangyutta Nikaya. But there is the powerful presence of a teaching that often gets to be neglected. There's some interesting exotic elements you might say also in the second sutta, but let us look for and find those elements that resonate with our practice, our life, and our understanding of the Dhamma, whether that understanding is there or not. That's also very important, because we have to start from somewhere. We have to start from somewhere. And that place has to be a place of honesty, and understanding comes with your willingness to push through that inertia I was mentioning. So, let us begin. So this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, Tika Nipata, which are the book of the threes. It is Anguttara Nikaya 3.33. So 3 sets of threes, or 1 set of threes. Anyhow, Sariputta Sutta, the Venerable Sariputta. At one time, the Venerable Sariputta, on having approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him and sat down to one side. Then the Blessed One spoke these words to him: Sariputta, I teach the Dhamma in brief, and I teach the Dhamma at length, in detail. I teach the Dhamma both in brief and at length in detail. These are 3 ways of teaching that you see throughout the suttas. The thousands and thousands and thousands of discourses, you see sometimes, especially when you're going through the Anguttara Nikaya, you see sometimes a very, very brief, it's not even outline, one could say, but it's tiny little short, even not, you can't even call it a paragraph, but it's so loaded with teachings. And then you have that broken up, outlined, and you see Lord Buddha going into specific, elaborated detail, while also adding in there the usage of similes, analogies, and metaphors. And then you see the combination. In my translations of the Anguttara Nikaya, I've seen this again and again, where you have, Patama. Patama means the first, or part 1 version of that sutta. Sometimes it would bear the same name. So you would have Patama, XYZ sutta, and then you would have Dutiya, which is the second, or part 2, and then you have the Tatiya, or the Chatu, or the third and the fourth, etc. But what you would have is an unfolding that's taking place. So the first, Lord Buddha would be giving it to a group of people, or in one setting, to students, something that's in, like a bite size. Because the capacity of the understanding of the person might not have been excellent, or the setting might not be appropriate, the time, this and that. So he would then say a few more words about it, so introduce more details about what he meant. And sometimes you see Venerable Ananda or Venerable Sariputta come and say, Bhante, that thing that you said, what did you mean? And that is where you find usually the detail plus the bringing in of the initial very short bite-sized instructions. So then you have the third version. So it's a wonderful method of teaching. So it's a wonderful pedagogical device that you don't see it, to my knowledge, in other cultures or traditions or ways of thinking of human history. So it's quite amazing. Let's continue. So ultimately, it all depends on the exceptionally rare phenomenon of individual listeners genuinely having the willingness to want to learn, and their capacity to understand all that I teach them. Here's where Lord Buddha switched the attention. So initially he said, I give it in short version, in long version, and then both short and long combined. But he says, ultimately, it all depends on the exceptional exceptionally rare occurrence where the individual is really there with the utmost level of willingness to learn, to really understand, and their capacity to get it. And that's when it just flows and I teach them, he says. So remember, Lord Buddha had the Dhamma. He is the king of the Dhamma. But like that first fellow that showed up, when Lord Buddha became an Arahant, he was the Buddha. And Lord Buddha's walking, and finally he decided to go ahead and teach beings. And there's this guy who shows up on the road, a farmer. And he's like, because he's mesmerized by his footprints and all that, and Lord Buddha's demeanor. And he says, are you a human? He says, no. Are you a god? He says, no. Who's your teacher? He says, I don't have a teacher. I am the Buddha, the awakened one. And the guy rolls his eyes and walks away. Imagine Lord Buddha's right there, and you're the very, very, very first person in eons since the last Buddha showed up. And you have been given an opportunity to be the first, the front row seat, and that guy blew it, the opportunity. So the willingness to learn is so imperative, to be present. And let's see what Venerable Sariputta says, because he did not miss an opportunity for sure. That's why he was, the chief disciple. Blessed Lord, now is the time, Venerable Sariputta says. This is the perfect time for the Tathagata to instruct us. Now is the time for the Blessed Lord to teach the Dhamma in brief as well as at length in its detailed form. Please, may the Blessed Lord teach us the Dhamma both in brief and at length in detail. This because here there are indeed those of us who have the capacity to understand what the Blessed One teaches. And the willingness, of course. That's why they're there. Ajahn Mun, whenever he would teach, as far as we're concerned, the father of Thai forest tradition, although the Thai forest tradition today has deviated so much from what Ajahn Mun was all about. He was dedicated wholeheartedly to the Dhamma and to the suttas, even though he would also state clearly that he had not studied the suttas, but his life was the embodiment of the Dhamma. So when he would teach, students would just flock. They would just come from all around Thailand, and they would walk through terribly difficult areas, wilderness, jungles, go hungry for days and weeks to go and listen to him speak the Dhamma, or to teach them specifically. So he would have a group of monks usually, and they would switch after he would train them, and they would reach a certain level, and he would send them off. And others would come, because it takes so much energy from a teacher to give from oneself, especially one as impeccable as Ajahn Mun was, for example, where he lived by the example of Lord Buddha and the Arya Savakas. So, and if somebody did not show up, let's say, something must have happened, or even if somebody was sick, he would go and tend to their wounds or their sickness or whatever, take care of them. So there was always this open contact. So nobody missed out on any of those meetings or the Dhamma discussions, because there was this urgency, and the Dhamma requires that urgency. Nobody's above that. Nobody's the exception to that. Can't be. Otherwise, there's no Dhamma there. So here, Venerable Sariputta is teaching us, you don't miss the opportunity. Because we are here, Bhante. We are here. Please teach us, he says. And traditionally, before Lord Buddha would give a Dhamma talk, there usually is an instigating request. a question can come up, or, oh, Bante, could you tell us about this? So there is like this welcome, there's this invitation. So here, we don't know if this is exactly how that setting took place, but the formulators of the canon from the first council felt it necessary to use this opportunity to get Venerable Sariputta to pull in more Dhamma and invite Lord Buddha to tell them more as to what it means. Is there more to it than what Lord Buddha said about the three categories of the device of teaching? In that case, Sariputta, you must train yourselves in this manner. I will no longer tolerate within me the presence of conceit, nor incline towards thinking or feeling possessively, as it relates to this physical body. In this way, I will no longer allow, but pull to pieces, that inner drive or assumption within that believes, this is mine, this is happening to me or belonging to me, or this is who, how, or what I am. It's got this powerful, sticky quality to it. This is also the basis of Sakkaya Ditthi, that inner doing, mentally doing, what? The patching together, building up with clay, as it were, this substantiality of a me-ness, of an I-ness, the making of an I, which is not something that happens in the past and that's it, it's done. No, we always add more things to it. We sustain it with every moment of delusion, with every moment that lacks sati. This is something that we do. How do we know it? Because we're not arahants yet. And this is the functioning, the thing that fuels you every single day. Your tank is always full with, this is mine, this is happening to me, or belonging to me, or this is who, how, or what I am. And the best way to see that is through your feelings, how you relate with realities, how you're relating with the world, the things that are happening to and around you, within you. And the quickest way to see if you're fluctuating inside, your feelings are all over the place, is while noticing that there is this agitation in you. Because if there is Dhamma in you, there's no agitation. That's the quickest way to know. That means there's contentment within you. Also, I will no longer tolerate within me the presence of conceit, nor incline towards thinking or feeling possessively, as it relates to external things being experienced through the 6 sense doors. So, the presence of conceit, yes, you're working internally, but in this case, it's indicating, Lord Buddha is telling us that that's one facet, right? Internally checking to see how your relationship is within you, with yourself, and your thinking. But here, he's saying the external things as well are included in this. In your ability to probe that mechanism of assumption, the assuming constantly, and also holding a position that this is, that just happened. Let's say the eyes picked up something, the nose is picking up something, the ears are picking up something. So what is happening to you? Usually the link up goes directly to contact, right? Last week we were talking about this. And then what happens? Feelings show up. Feeling is always going to have a certain signature about it. And this is what we also mean by Pancha Upadana Khanda, the grabbing 5 aggregates. You're grabbing on to feeling, Vedana. You're grabbing on to the consciousness that came in, through the eye, the visible object, and because you're giving attention and all the other factors are there, suddenly I now am holding a position towards what it was that I saw, hence the eye consciousness. So we drop the eye consciousness completely and we go to what resulted from that, meaning the contact and then the feeling. Already it's done. It's you're gone, you passed beyond the point of no return, because you're already hurt, or you're ecstatic. You're ecstatic that this thing happened to you, or you're perplexed because of this. So there is dis-ease, there is no contentment. So all of this whole messed up situation is indicating what? The taking it possessively, the attitude of the presence of conceit, which is one of the upper sangyojanas. This is what an anagami has to really face and work through. Otherwise, the presence of conceit will inhibit the person from becoming an arahant. And we all have conceit. This is not just a problem for non-returners. Thus, I will come to attain and taste for myself the release of the heart and liberation through wisdom. Chitta vimutti, and the other one is panya vimutti. So these are two qualities that means basically, there's a term in the Dhamma which is called in English liberated in both ways. One is through the attainment of the jhanas. Usually that's what is referred to as chitta vimutti, where the heart is liberated. And the other one is liberation through wisdom. That means you have really probed, and let's check as to who it was that Lord Buddha is talking to, teaching here. It's Venerable Sariputta, who was, by the way, one of those disciples who attained both ways. In both ways, liberated in both ways, the term is. So I will then live, and by the way, we don't know whether at the time of this teaching being given to Venerable Sariputta and the other bhikkhus around, whether he was an arahant yet. So there was no caveat, there was no footnotes that says that. Excuse me. But I would like to think that he wasn't, because this teaching is directly pointing him in the right direction, in the right method of becoming a liberated one in both ways. That's, of course, my opinion. So I will then live my everyday life dwelling and functioning from that place of deepest understanding. Once the person has become released through the heart and liberated through wisdom, he says to oneself, I will then live my everyday life, dwelling and functioning from that place of deepest understanding, no longer susceptible to that old inner drive or assumption to either think or feel, this is mine, this is happening to me, or belonging to me, or this is who, how, or what I am. The conceit I am is really poisonous. That can take the shape of your accomplishments in life, the way you look. Not just you, but the way you look at others for how they look, who they represent. There's parts in the world, if you go there, and if you don't match what their ideal is, somebody they feel comfortable around, you're not that, let's say, then you're going to create chaos and discomfort for them and for you especially. So what is racism? What is sexism? And all the other isms? In my travels, whether it was Armenia or other places in the Middle East, you have this national identity, or you also have that obviously growing around the world, in the US and other places. And when I was in Mexico, they would look at me and they would say, oh, gringo. And there was one time I was trying to get a place to reside, and one of the places we looked at, and the individual was very, in a way, he made it very blatantly clear that he didn't like it for us to rent his place. Why? And he said, gringo, this and that. And meanwhile, he looked more, as the quintessential terminology for a gringo is seen, in culture. I didn't have those qualities. I mean, features, shall we say. And I just looked at him, and he had blonde hair, blue-eyed, and one would say he was more gringo than I was. But the person was looking down at me as an American coming to his part of, and that was not the case with all of Mexico. Of course, I met some wonderful people. This was an exception, but there's many exceptions. Such, there's this national pride that I see in other places, like I mentioned. Oh, I'm proud of being this. That's one of the most nonsensical things one could say. Now you happen to be Italian, or now you happen to be Armenian, now you happen to be Maori. What about the previous life? What about the millions and billions of lifetimes that you cannot even trace? So you see, this whole idea of this is mine, you can quickly dismantle it by simply bringing in the reality of past lives. Or even the way you thought last year compared to how you think today. That also is counting on your belief, your assumption that there is this stable part of you that is unchanging. There is none. Lord Buddha is saying the obvious to us, but we are such, thick-headed individuals that we don't seem to understand. We don't consider. That's why I always insist on reminding us that the Dhamma is not in books. The Dhamma, meaning, is not an intellectual affair. You must invite it into your life and see if you are living such a life, if you are holding on to such positions as this is who I am and I'm proud of it, or why does this thing happen to me? Always to my people. You bought you've bitten the bait. You've been had, basically. You're fooled because there's this presence of Sakkaya Ditthi. You're believing in a substantial presence of a self when everything is changing. But such an individual here who has been liberated no longer is susceptible to that old inner drive of having this special place for oneself in one's mind, one's own reactions to situations. When things are happening, they're happening to him or her, versus they are simply happening. Do you see the difference there? This is happening to me versus this is simply happening. Had I not been here, would this really be happening to me? I'm often reminded of, I mentioned this in the past, how when I was a teenager and I would walk from work to get home in Beirut, there would be car bombings. It's not a right term, car bombing, as if somebody is making it happen, sending something. No, the car would be parked there, sometimes for hours or days even, and then they would wait for people to gather, more and more people to be passing there, like a rush hour or prime time during the day, and then somebody would blow it up. And that's how you would have hundreds and hundreds of people completely mangled up and dead, plus the thousands of people who would be injured and all that, because the streets in Beirut are very, very tight. It's an old city. So sometimes you would get home and then it would happen. the bomb would blow up, would go off, and then you're in a shock and trauma for days, weeks, months, thinking, well, what if I ended up passing by that location an hour later than when I did, because I would not be here today. So, these things would go through my mind and ask, okay, which one, so I was there, I guess, at the right time to pass through it versus at the wrong time, like others were. The unreliability of things, of the way we think, is crucial when you are bringing in the equation of the formula of anicca. This is key. It's always changing. So it was not relevant to me. I mean, it was not a situation where it's happening to me, but things are happening. Things are happening. That really can ease us in our dealing with life's difficulties, by simply removing that presence of an atta or atman, the presence of a self, the unbreakable self that doesn't change, which only is coming from a place of ignorance. It is in this manner, Sariputta, that the discipline is undertaken, according to which you must all train yourselves. And when Sariputta, the bhikkhu, seriously trains himself each day by no longer tolerating within himself the presence of conceit, nor inclining towards thinking or feeling possessively, as it relates to this physical body, no longer allowing but pulling to pieces that inner drive or assumption within which believes this is mine, this is happening to me, or belonging to me, or this is who or how or what I am. Remember, here it says, nor inclining towards thinking or feeling possessively. That's another thing that we take or hold possession of. The feeling, I am hurt, I am perplexed, I am restless, versus something nasty happened around you and your blood pressure will fluctuate accordingly. There was a threatening situation. You were there, you were a witness to it, or it happened to you physically. So naturally, there are these things happening. But the problem is, unlike the warthog in the middle of the Serengeti that's being chased by a leopard, once the chase is unsuccessful for the leopard, they've done this experiment, biologists, etc., from, I think it was from Stanford. They went to Africa and they had these electrodes and things put on poor warthog, and they were looking at the charts and also the blood and all that. So they saw that the warthog dropped it. The blood pressure went up sky high, obviously. All the energy went, all the blood went straight to the muscle so that it can propel itself, run faster, faster, faster. Otherwise, it will be lunch for the leopard. But once it was able to evade the leopard's attack, the warthog suddenly, this wild pig suddenly regained its composure, meaning the blood pressure balanced itself. The adrenaline, all that came back to normal, to baseline, rather quickly. Now, the problem with us humans, we dwell on it. Oh, you're never going to see a warthog going over to his buddies and say, you're 3 weeks later and say, oh, that leopard over there was running after me. I can't, and go off on that again, like we do. We sit down and dwell on it. We mope to ourselves and sometimes to others. But what is that doing to you? That's the thing that Lord Buddha is interested. It keeps us in delusion. It keeps us, delusion by itself, one would say, well, it's harmless, but the problem is it is not harmless. It leaves us in more and more suffering. It attracts more suffering to us. The delusion. That's why I term it stupidity, avidya. It's not a passive thing, delusion or ignorance, because it's almost like passive, like you have nothing to do with it almost. But no, we have to sustain that state. We have to maintain it. And that takes effort, hence the stupidity part. Versus pulling ourselves out of that inertial way of thinking that this is who I am. I'm special. That is conceit. Also, when he no longer tolerates within himself the presence of conceit, nor inclines towards thinking or feeling possessively, as it relates to external things that he keeps experiencing through the six sense doors, while no longer allowing but pulling to pieces the inner drive or assumption within that believes this is mine, this is happening to me or belonging to me, or this is who I am, then such a bhikkhu will personally attain and taste for himself the release of the heart and liberation through wisdom. That's Lord Buddha's promise. If you are able to cut that part of you out, by understanding, of course. Why am I taking these things personally? Who is there that I'm calling mine? What is it that I'm so proud of being, of this gender or this skin or whatever, this culture? Really? Who am I kidding? When you start asking those questions and then you're putting cracks into the dam, it's going to break. And soon enough, Lord Buddha says, it will break and you will attain liberation, because you cannot maintain those two worlds. Taking it personally, identifying yourself as something, while at the same time attaining liberation from it. It doesn't work. It's like a bird that's flapping its wings while at the same time somehow reaching over to try to lock itself in place with some chains attaching itself. It doesn't work. Attaching itself to the ground or cementing its feet into the ground. Meanwhile, it's flapping its wings to fly. That is what often happens with individuals trying to study the Dhamma or trying to practice the Dhamma. Meanwhile, they're trying to keep both. That's another reason why I've had students who came to me and said, well, what's wrong with passion? I want to be passionate. But at the same time, want to discover the Dhamma. It doesn't work. The Dhamma is all about dismantling that passion, because passion is the reason why we are in trouble. Because passion, it does not necessarily only mean some level of pleasure, which is not happiness. Pleasure is not equal to happiness. In our delusion, we've come to see them to be synonymous, but they're not. Because happiness does not bring suffering. Pleasure does. The person who's cheating on their partner, the person who's going into the bank and stealing, they're gaining a lot of pleasure from the risk factor, this, that. They might get some pleasure there, but sooner or later, at least to someone else, they're causing much pain, and that pain is also going to come to them. Hence, we practice sila. One of the reasons. So you see, happiness doesn't have any of those criteria. No longer being susceptible to that old inner drive or assumption to either think or feel, this is mine, this is happening to me, or belonging to me, or this is who, how, or what I am. Now, when this is done, Sariputta, such a bhikkhu is then declared as a bhikkhu who has truly cut off craving at its root, having eradicated and pulled out each and every one of the fetters, sangyojanas, of which I mentioned mana or conceit. So pulled out each and every one of the fetters completely and absolutely, destroying every aspect of conceit, and has now finally ended suffering. After all, Sariputta, it was in reference to this that the answer was provided to the question raised by Udaya, as mentioned in the Parayana. Parayana is the last book of the Sutta Nipata, which is one of the earliest books that we have intact of Lord Buddha's teachings, because we see that we can cross-reference them within the suttas. So this was Lord Buddha's way of referring to the Sutta Nipata, saying that's already there. So that's why I answered Udaya in that way, in that sutta, in the Parayana. Parayana is in the Sutta Nipata. And last year I translated it. It's a beautiful, beautiful book of 5 volumes, and it's an amazing reference to the teachings, and they're so down to earth. But this is Lord Buddha's explanation. This is why I said it, he says, and he's giving now the answer that you also find in the Sutta Nipatas, Parayana. Here goes. Give up entirely your impassioned attitude towards sensual pleasures and for painful and distressing situations. Throw out drowsiness and cultivate wise restraint, so as to eliminate all manner of regrets. So in essence, he's talking about the hindrances, the nivarana, because the person, Udaya, who became a monk, he came to ask Lord Buddha. He was one of those individuals, yogis, looking for a teacher, and he found Lord Buddha. So, and the student's role is to always ask and to see if this person is a match for me or I am a match for them, and let's meet and let's see where each one is. And he asked a question about meditation and going deep, and Lord Buddha is giving him directly the medicine. He's saying you need to work on understanding the hindrances, sensual pleasures, distressing situations, drowsiness, tinhamida. But in all of these, you need to approach it with proper sangvara. Sangvara is the restraint. Restraint is also going to pull you back from saying, oh, this is happening to me, or why does all this always happen to me? Or you enjoy something wonderful and you're saying, I want to hold on to this. What are you holding on to? And who is this you that is doing the holding? And where is this holding business? Have you ever seen a tree hold on to its fruits from, time of harvest? Sometimes I've seen them. This, a few months ago, where I was staying, there was a tree outside, and it was an orange tree apparently, and all the oranges had fallen. No, it was a fig tree, I'm sorry. All the figs had fallen from the tree or were collected, but there was one fig that was left there. Probably somebody didn't reach it, but it had turned into almost like calcified. It was there. It was dead. There cannot be any life left when there's a holding on, because life also includes the passing of life. They work together. Things are changing. That's another way of observing impermanence in life. And the verse continues, and as you work on purifying the practice with mindfulness and equanimity, continue applying wholesome examination of the various states you encounter. That's Dhamma Vichaya. You're applying panya to observe. You're looking for wholesome examination. Otherwise, it could be unwholesome, where we call that analysis, where people can think that applying analysis or modes of analysis is itself meditation. And that's why their blood pressure will go up. They're restless. There's too much heat and agitation, and the mind will never get to equanimity, which is what Lord Buddha wants us to get to with the help of sati. This way, I declare you will come to personally taste release by way of direct knowing that smashes out and utterly obliterates ignorance. So beautiful sutta, but this is the first of the two suttas that I have prepared for us. This, and I encourage you to look for the similarities thematically between the suttas. That's why I selected them. One is from the numerical discourses, which is out of almost 10,000 suttas, and the other one is from the Samyutta Nikaya, which is what we're going to go over. So this is sutta number 35.69 from the connected discourses. It is the Upasena A Sutta, the Venerable Upasena and the snake. So it is from the Salayatana Vagga Samyutta, which happened to be referring to the sixth sense spheres section, and then from the Migajala Vagga, the section on Migajala. So this has to do, again, Venerable Sariputta is one of the protagonists, as I was mentioning. And here we are introduced to Venerable Upasena, who's an interesting character. And it's a brief sutta. That's why I felt we can do it in one day, one session. But I invite you to look at the occurrence here of this situation between these bhikkhus and what Lord Buddha just said in the other sutta that we went over, 3.33 of Sariputta Sutta. And the core of that teaching, see if you can identify it here in some form or the other. So let's begin. Samyutta Nikaya 35.69. Upasena A Sutta. At one time, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Upasena, along with their students, were staying within the snake's hood cave at Rajagha's cool forest. It must have been a big cave because you have a lot of bhikkhus there. It was then that one day, while sitting, a venomous snake fell upon the Venerable Upasena's body, at which point the Venerable Upasena addressed the bhikkhus next to him by saying, "Friends, come and lift this body of mine onto the bed and carry it outside into the open air before it gets scattered right here, much like a handful of discarded chaff blown by the wind." This is the exotic element that I was referring to. So basically, they were sitting meditating, or let's assume they were meditating, but they could have been engaged in a Dhamma discussion. But you can tell that there was something dynamic going on because of what Venerable Sariputta is going to say. See, I love these background, human element. The context is so important. That's how you can put yourself in the midst of such an environment. And it becomes alive. Then it becomes not just a story you're reading, but it's a relatable scene. It could be happening to you. It could be happening to you, to us. So it just so happened that a snake fell. I mean, come on, they're sitting in a snake's hood cave. I mean, the name should give it away. And they're sitting and meditating, and a snake falls. And apparently it says it's a venomous snake, and especially because of what Venerable Upasena has said about it. Now, once he said this, the Venerable Sariputta turned to the Venerable Upasena and remarked, "But friend, we did not notice any sudden reactions nor changes within our Venerable Upasena's body at all. Your faculties seem as sharp as ever, with no changes detected whatsoever in your behavior. Yet, why is the Venerable Upasena saying, 'Friends, come and lift this body of mine onto the bed and carry it outside into the open air before it gets scattered right here, much like a handful of discarded chaff blown by the wind?'" Now, there's several things going on here. it's clear that, well, discarded chaff, if you have wheat, like a farmer, or rice, especially with wheat, they usually toss after they've done the harvest, they've collected, it's a pile of wheat, but it's still not released from its chaff. The chaff is the outside casing of it. So what they would, it's very light compared to the actual wheat grain. So they would get a rake or something like that, and they would lift it up and they would toss it into the air. So from all that friction and the air blowing, the chaff would just be like cotton. It would flow away, and the heaviness or the weight of the grains of wheat, they will fall back to earth because of gravity. Now, what is why is he saying he will be basically disintegrated? From this statement, we can understand that he must have practiced a kasina, a certain type of a kasina practice, which is a concentration practice. There's different kasinas. There's usually the patavi, which is the earth element. There is the fire element. So the person will make a piece of clay or from soil, then they would put it on the wall or look at it, stare. So it's circular. Something is, about a foot maybe in diameter, and circular. So other times it's if it's a fire, so what they would do is they would light a candle and they would put it in front of them, and then they would sit and meditate by staring at it and thinking only fire, 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 or patavi, 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 looking just, so there's nothing else for that person. So it's a deep, one-pointed concentration. And Lord Buddha was an advocate of that for some people, and you see it very, generously mentioned in the suttas also. But there's also a practice of using the air or the sky as an element of concentration, as a kasina. There's also the colors, white, blue, red, yellow, etc. All of these, not like there's something special about yellow or blue or white. These are simply tools, just like in the case of the breath. And by the way, the breath was also used as obviously as concentration practice to allow the mind to get to deeper and deeper levels of jhana. When the person gets into the fourth jhana, that's when the mind is very, very equanimous. So they can take the route of going into the past lives, trying to explore that, or they can want to go into practicing or getting the certain abhinyas or siddhis or iddhis, such as psychic abilities, etc. Now here you have an arahant who had the time later on to practice this one-pointed concentration to get to the disintegration part. Another venerable who became an arahant at the age of 7, whom we've discussed in a past session, was Venerable Dabba Mallaputta, who was known for his fire element. So he had kasina. So he was already an arahant. So he had just had the time. I mean, the holy life has been lived. So he's like, okay, what do I do with my spare time? The task is done. So sometimes you had the arahants go and say, okay, I guess I can just now mess around with these abilities and see and go deep enough and make myself useful. So there's this clear understanding in the case of Venerable Upasena that he has that. It's like somebody who speaks French fluently or German or Dutch or Swahili. You're fluent in it. And you see some people talking and you have the ability. It's with that much certainty, if not even more. And you're understanding them, and they come to you and you just speak to them in their language and they're blown away. In this case, I guess no pun intended, but with the discarded chaff being blown away. So Venerable Dabba Mallaputta, when he decided that it was time for him to leave, to go into, die basically, And he went to Lord Buddha requesting if he could, exit life. And Lord Buddha, knowing him, and since he was 7, and he was already an arahant, and he says, Dabba, you do whatever is you see to be fit for you to do. And he bows to Lord Buddha, and then he gets up and circumambulates him by keeping him to his right and 3 times, and then he goes back to sitting in front of Lord Buddha, and he rises off the ground, levitates, and he goes up, and every bhikkhu who's there is looking. So their necks are going up like this. They're looking at their fellow bhikkhu, Venerable Dabba. Young bhikkhu, by the way. Most probably he was in his late teens or early 20s, one would say. And he just goes into the fire kasina, which he was a master of. Just like in the case of Venerable Upasena, he was a master of the air element. He had mastered it within the body. So in this case, in the case of Venerable Dabba, he turned his body into a blaze. He sat there. So he created fire, and he doesn't allow himself to burn until he decides to. So this is a very strange thing for modern humans to understand, or for science to understand. And then he allows himself to be suddenly incinerated. So self-cremation. And he did it so well that he did not leave any relics of himself. So he just went poof, blazing, and then he disappeared. There was no soot, no ash, nothing coming back to the earth. That's a perfect cremation. He didn't care to leave anything remnant of him left for others to worship or respect. So I mentioned this just to give you a contrasting story of another venerable who did something that, as we're going to see in a minute, with Venerable Upasena. So that's I guess, the technical aspect of what's being said here. Now let's go to the more important part of the sutta. Then the Venerable Upasena responded to the Venerable Sariputta's remarks by saying, Friend Sariputta, you would indeed notice a sudden reaction or definite changes within this body, as well as in my faculties, which would be seriously affected, and all that turmoil in my behavior would be fully witnessed and detected by you had I been someone who goes on thinking, I am my I, or this I is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the I and myself are one and the same. So he says, if I were taking it personally, if I would be somebody who says, this is my body, where did that venomous, why me? You didn't see that with Venerable Upasena. Come on, there's all these bhikkhus sitting here, minding my own business, and a snake falls and bites me with its venom. Or me, my neck, where did he bite me? That's still identification. So Venerable Upasena says, if I would be somebody like that, then you would have noticed some reaction coming from my behavior. Or that I am my ear, or this ear is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the ear and myself are one and the same. Or that I am my nose, or this nose is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the nose and myself are one and the same. Or that I am my tongue, or this tongue is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the tongue and myself are one and the same. Or that I am my body, or this body is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the body and myself are one and the same. Or that I am my mind, or this mind is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the mind and myself are one and the same. But, friend Sariputta, seeing that no such thinking or perceiving takes place within me, why would there be any change in my faculties, demeanor, or behavior for you and other observers to witness or detect? Sometimes people say, you're teaching us to become numb to life. Remember earlier I was saying about people commenting about the passion? So if there's a lack of passion, then immediately they think that they've become a piece of dead wood or rock, lifeless. You're taking away the passion. This meditation thing, this Buddhism thing is taking, they miss the point, because there's a middle ground here. Siddhartha Gautama was a slave to passion for some time. As a prince, he was in luxury, he was in pleasure world. He left that, but he went to the other side, where he was not even responding to the basic needs of his body. He was abusing the body. He wanted it to become numb, a dead thing. In fact, he came really close to death a few times. That's not it either. Two extremes. This is the Majjhima Pada. This is the middle path. So obviously, Venerable Upasena is feeling the snake. He can get cold, Venerable Mahakassapa, he became sick, We've talked about the Sutta on the Bojjhangas, where he got sick, other bhikkhus, including Lord Buddha, became sick. So an arahant has a body. They do have feelings, yes, but the mind is so sharp, they see things for what they are. There isn't that substrate that is run by ignorance that says, this is happening to my body. This is happening to this body is a completely different thing than this is happening to my body. And the Venerable Sariputta said, in that case, it is clear to us that our dear Venerable Upasena has already relinquished long ago all that sort of self-obsessed ways of thinking and conceit, no longer allowing, but having already pulled to pieces that inner drive or assumption within, which says, this is mine, or this is happening to me, or belonging to me, or this is who, how, or what I am. It is so wonderful indeed to see how our dear Venerable Upasena has completely pulled out from its roots the very ignorance which is responsible for the deluded thinking that says, I am my eye, or this eye is mine, or that I am my ear, or this ear is mine. Or I'm abbreviating these sections because it's a repetition of what we went over just now. Or that I am my nose, or this nose is mine. Or that I am my tongue, or this tongue is mine. Or that I am my body, or this body is mine. Or that I am my mind, or this mind is mine, while perceiving the whole phenomena as the mind and myself are one and the same. So he would never see that. You don't see that anymore, he says. And as this was being said, the bhikkhus gathered there proceeded to quickly lift the Venerable Upasena, while helping him onto the bed as they carried him outside into the open air. Not long after, the Venerable Upasena's body disintegrated in front of their eyes, as it scattered right there into the open air and vanished, much like a handful of discarded chaff blown by the wind. So. This path backs up everything that you listen to. Your practice and your development in your practice, authentic practice, allows you to see snippets of that truth. And like I said in the beginning, the more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. That's the thing with everything, right? In every profession, every effort. You read a book. If you stop on page 1, having read only one sentence and close the book, put it away, you will never find out what's happening on the last page or the last line of the first page. So the more you put, the more you get. So there's no difference here with the Dhamma. None. It's the same principle that applies. But sometimes we think that, well, it has to be an exception to that because I am putting my part like, half an hour or 1 hour a day, and that should count for, awakening. Come on. How come it's not happening? There's more dedication from us to other things that really we all know and identify as being trivial, such as getting a good place to live, or paying your mortgage or rent, or what clothes you're going to wear today. Many of us are much more cognizant, aware of the items that you're going to be wearing that day than of holding a second of sati during that day. It's crazy. So, but at the same time, what is on the line, as they say? What is at risk? This life. And this is what Lord Buddha dedicated 45 years of his life, trying to shake people into understanding and really come to grips with and really appreciate. If you want pure 24 karat gold, you have to pay the price for that. If you don't pay the equivalent price for 24 karat gold, you're going to get something that is pretending to be gold, or whatever your budget allows. There's 18 karat gold, there's 14 karat gold, there's anything lower than 14 karat, they just call it yellow metal. You're going to get something like that. But this is your life. You have dedicated your life, different portions of your life, different decades of your life to different things. You've striven so much. You are striving in different areas of your life. You have goals. Wonderful. You need to have goals. You have to make decisions. Otherwise, the more decisions you make, the more alive you become. It pulls you out from inertia. So that's a good thing. But can you bring in the Dhamma into that equation? You don't have to become a bhikkhu or a monastic to taste the Dhamma. You can taste the fruits of the Dhamma as a layman, as a laywoman, and live a beautiful life, maturing in your spiritual qualities as a person and break free from samsara even. But the work that we're putting in, the time we're putting in, the commitments and consistency in your maintaining sati, for example, is key. That's never going to be, something that you graduate from and you just drop in and you don't do anymore. So I've been talking for some time, and I'll pause here to see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, there's the PDFs of today's suttas are available on the website. And if you have any questions, you can shoot them my way. Otherwise, let us transfer some merits. Please bear in mind, bring to your heart individuals who are cherished by you, alive or those who have died, as well as those that you're having difficulties with. And just bring them to mind, let them share in the benefits of the merits of your effort in being present and being mindful and trying to put yourself there within the Venerable Ones in that scene of each of the suttas. Your happiness depends on your efforts. And generosity is a big part of that. So let's transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam Akasatha cha bhumatha deva naga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha cha bhumatha deva naga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well, and may the efforts that you're putting in bear fruit sooner than later. And may your smiles never leave your faces. And may you be authentic with your living. And be forgiving of yourself. Please remind yourself. Just like Lord Buddha said, the mind. Look at the mind and don't take it. If the mind is not calm, if the mind is tumultuous, okay, it's the mind that is being tumultuous. That doesn't mean that that's an opportunity for you to go beating yourself up, shaming yourself. No, no, no. How is that going to help? Always ask yourself, how is this helping me now? That's why I used to tell my patients as a therapist. Always ask yourself, how is this helping me now? And if there's no response, I would tell them, if there's just crickets, if you just hear crickets, then that is the end of that, because you realize it wasn't helping you. But if whatever you were thinking, whatever you were feeling truly is helpful on some level, you would get some response from you, from your heart. Well, if I do this, then I'll get that. Okay. But oftentimes, 95% of what we're thinking are negative. It doesn't have to be that way. This path is trying to pull us out of that mindset. So I encourage you to spend some time thinking about that and approaching it. You approach your difficult situations, scenarios with that approach. May you be well, and may the Triple Gems blessings be with you and all your loved ones. Until next time. Sukhi Hotu.
Sukhi Hotu.